Hello everyone, it's me Uncle John. Today I am going to read S5 5083 Amistad, Chapter 10. James Covey, Baldwin and Johnson now realized that they had to talk to think. Together they thought of a plan. They had to find someone who knew Sing's language. So they learned the numbers from 1 to 10 from Sing. Then they went down to where the ships came in. There were usually plenty of Africans there. They spent the night moving from table to table, the smoky cafes there. They repeated the numbers in Sing's language. Finally, they had a piece of luck. A young black sailor, James Covey, heard them and looked up, interested. He had a story to tell too. When he was a boy, some Spanish men kidnapped him from Africa. But a British ship saved him and the others on the journey. He never went back to Africa. Now, as a man of 19, he spoke both English and Sing's African language perfectly. Baldwin and Justin explained what was happening to the African. Covey agreed to help them at once. The next night, Sing stayed in prison, listening to Covey. First, Covey told the story to Sing. Then, as Baldwin explained the new problem, Covey repeated his words in Sing's language. Judge Justin wanted you all to go free, but now there is a new different judge instead of him. How is it possible? Sing wanted to know. In his village, when a man had an important job like that, the job was his for the rest of his life. We can't understand it either, but it has happened. Baldwin stopped to think for a minute, then he continued. I need you to help me. When we return to court, I need you to speak. Sing shook his head. I'm not the right person. I can't speak for the others. They say that you can. They say that you are the big man here, the most important man. They told me that you alone once killed the lion. Isn't it true? Sing saw that he had to explain about the lion. Lion was killing people in a village, he began slowly. Everyone was afraid. He closed his eyes, remembering. One night he came again hungry, ready to kill. I had no knife, only a heavy stone. The lion followed me away from my sleeping wife and children. Then I threw the stone as hard as I could. The stone hit the lion and killed it. Everyone was so happy. They gave me a lot of land, but really it was an accident. I was just lucky. Sink looked at Baldwin. He wanted him to understand. I'm not a big man. I was only looking after my family like any other man. Baldwin thought for a moment, but what about the other lion, the Amistad? Was that an accident too? That wasn't brave. I just wanted to get back to my family. I can help you, Baldwin said quietly. If you will help me, you must tell me how you came here from so far away. Tell us your story. Chapter 11, Sing's story. Sing stayed in his small prison room with Baldwin and Justin, but he was thinking now of his village in Sierra Leone. He could almost see his big fields, good for growing rice. He could look up at the blue sky and past the fields into the green forest. He could smell rain in the air. Early one morning, I was in the fields with my brother, Bato. We were planting rice. I left Bato for a short time to go back to the village. My wife and 3 children will be awake now. I thought I wanted to have a meal with them before I returned to work. I loved to walk along the path with trees on both sides. I could see the village a long way in front of me. My father's home was in the center. He was the big man in many. He was old but very clever. Now I could see my wife coming out of our house. My young son was following her, playing. Suddenly, someone jumped on me from behind and pulled me down to the ground. They threw a net over me. Bato, I shouted, but my brother was too far away. He didn't hear me. They pointed a gun at my head and pushed me into the forest. We walked for days and nights. We met other kidnappers and the prisoners on the way. One of them was the Boaké. Finally, we came to the high door of Lomboko, the slave factory. We knew about it already. It was not unusual for people to disappear in a village. Stories got back to us about what happened. They locked hundreds of men, women, and children together like animals waiting to die. Some were sick, many died, but hundreds were still there. They waited for white men in their white clothes and white hats to sell them for gold. And they took us onto a great ship. More and more of us, they pushed us. men and women and children, toward a small dark hole. There was a terrible smell of too many people coming from that hole. I fought against my kidnappers. I didn't want to go into that slave hole. And as they threw me in, I turned and had one last look at Africa, green and beautiful, with the sun coming up in the morning. Every day and night, people became sick and died. We had to throw the dead into the sea, where hungry fishes swam, waiting. I myself had to do that terrible job. There was never enough food or water. We all became weak, especially the very young and the very old. One day, while I was walking, I suddenly saw a young mother with a child in her thin arms. She was standing at the side of the ship. For a second, she looked at me, her eyes wild. Then, before I could stop her, she jumped into the sea, into the mouth of the great fish. Another time, while the healthy ones were working, the Spanish sailors pulled some old fishing nets across the floor. They were full of heavy metal balls. They tied 50 or more sick Africans to the net. I realized what they were doing. Everyone realized what they were doing. I fought and tried to stop them, but it was not possible. I had a heavy chain on me. I stood there, unable to do anything. Spanish sailors kicked the nets and all 50 people into the sea. Baldwin, Justin, and Kobe listened silently. Sink told the rest of the story about the journey from Africa across the Atlantic to Cuba. The next day in court, Sink told it again. The room was full of people, but there was no sound and no one moved as he spoke. Baldwin stood before him in the court, and Kobe sat next to him, repeating his words in English. Finally, after months on water, we came to land. There were so many white people there, all so busy, they took us to another slave prison. It was even bigger than the one at the Lombok. They gave us rice and bananas to eat, as much as we wanted. They wanted to make us fat. We were afraid that they wanted to eat us. Then we had to dance for them. They put oil on our bodies until our black skin just shone. I soon realized that they didn't want to eat us. They wanted to sell us. Here Sink stopped. His head dropped in front of the room full of people. They showed us to people. We felt like animals. We had no clothes on us, only chains. They sold us to Ruiz and Montes, who put us on a smaller, faster ship, the Amistad. They were taking us to work in the sugar fields. Sink told the court about their fight to be free on the Amistad. I wanted to kill them too, he said, pointing at Ruiz and Montes, but then we thought that they were taking us home. Baldwin moved away from Sink and returned to his chair. For a few minutes, no one was able to speak. Then the Hollaber stood up and looked at Sink with an unpleasant smile. That's the most interesting story, Hollaber said, but some of it is difficult to understand. For you, so why did the Spanish man kill some of the slaves? Slaves mean money. In fact, I don't really think that any of your story is true, is it? But like all untrue story, it was very amusing. Oliver turned round and walked away. As Sink watched him, he felt that there was no hope. The end.